All right, so you know how we've all had that experience. You go online and bam, a chatbot pops up and wants your email address before you can even say hello.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Well, today we're going to do a deep dive into why that is and why it can really backfire on a business. And we'll be looking at some of the insights from this article. Why your chatbot asking for an email address is a bad idea.
I think it's interesting because we think of chatbots as a way to, make things easier online. But this article really points out how asking for that email right away can actually make people not trust the company.
Yeah, it's kind of counterintuitive, right?
Yeah.
Because you think, oh, if we can get their email address early on, then that's great. But the article argues that it can actually damage the user experience. And even more importantly, it undermines that sense of trust.
Yeah, because think about it, like you're the user, you just landed on a site, you're looking for some information or help, and boom, before you even get a chance to ask a question, it's like, give me your email.
Right.
It feels less like a helpful conversation and more like an interrogation. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And like, I don't know, I've definitely felt that, like almost a sense of like being interrogated. And I think the article makes a really good analogy. It's like walking into a store and before you can even browse, they're asking you for your phone number.
Right.
Just feels off.
It does, and there's actually research that shows that chatbots that focus on addressing the user's needs first actually have better engagement and they build trust. So, it may seem smart to get that email address right away, but it might actually be hurting you.
Interesting. So why is that though? I mean, is it just because it feels like we're being interrogated?
I mean, I think that's definitely part of it, but, there's also the increasing concern about data privacy these days. People are much more careful about who they're giving their information to, especially online.
Right.
So if a company is asking for your email address right off the bat, and they haven't given you any value, you haven't gotten anything out of the interaction, it's natural to wonder, like, what are they going to do with this information? Do they really need it at this stage?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Hmm.
I think I would feel that way too.
And the article actually points out that because of that, it can have some unintended consequences, like people might just give you a fake email address.
Oh, really?
Yeah, just to get past that initial hurdle. Or, even worse, they might just abandon the interaction completely because it just feels so off-putting.
Yeah, I can see that happening too. And that's not what companies want, right? They're
Mhm.
trying to get leads and build relationships, not drive people away.
Exactly. So the article suggests a different approach. They call it the value-first approach.
Okay. I like the sound of that. Tell me more.
So instead of treating users like walking data points, the focus should really be on providing genuine help and building trust. The chatbot should start by understanding what the user's needs are and offering them relevant information or assistance.
So it's more like, hey, how can I help you today? Instead of email, please.
Right, exactly. You want to create a welcoming and helpful environment, where the user feels comfortable. And then if it's really necessary, you can ask for the email address, but only when it makes sense, like maybe later in the conversation when you've already provided some value.
Okay, so I'm starting to see the logic here, but I'm also thinking, wouldn't that mean, by waiting to ask for the email, wouldn't companies potentially miss out on leads?
Well, the article actually argues the opposite because by building trust and providing value up front, businesses are more likely to get quality leads, those who are genuinely interested and who are more likely to stick around long term.
I guess that makes sense. It's like that old saying, you can catch more flies with honey than with vinegar.
Exactly. If you come on too strong, you're going to scare people away. But if you're patient, build a rapport first, they're more likely to give you their information willingly.
So you're basically saying it's about playing the long game, focusing on building relationships rather than just getting that quick hit of an email address.
That's right. And there's a great quote from Terry Wilson, co-founder of chatmetrics.com, who says, present clear value before requesting user details. This helps boost engagement and generate more qualified leads.
Okay, I'm sold on the value first approach.
Yeah.
But how do we actually design chatbots that can pull this off?
Yeah.
How do we strike that balance between being helpful and engaging without being too pushy?
Well, that's a great question. And it takes us to a really interesting area where AI and those good old-fashioned rule-based systems can actually work together to make a more effective chatbot experience.
Okay, now you're talking my language. I'm not a super techie person, so break it down for me.
Yeah.
How do AI and rules work together in a chatbot?
Sure. So you can think of it this way. AI gives the chatbot the ability to understand language, all those complex sentences and questions, and it can learn from each interaction and give responses that are personalized.
Okay, I get that part.
But then we need to make sure that the chatbot doesn't go completely off the rails, and that's where the rule-based systems come in.
So the rules are kind of like a safety net.
Exactly. They provide some structure to the conversation, like guidelines that keep the chatbot on track so it gives the right information at the right time and avoids those awkward or frustrating interactions.
Right, that makes sense. So it's not a question of AI or rules, it's about finding the right balance.
Yeah, and the article actually highlights a company called chatmetrics.com as a really good example of a company that's doing this well. They use AI to power their chatbots, but they also operate within a structured framework, that makes sure the conversation flows smoothly and stays focused on the user's needs.
That's cool. It's like technology and human touch working together.
Exactly.
But what about situations where you really do need a human touch? Like a really complex issue, or maybe a customer who needs some extra empathy and understanding.
So that's where live chat services come in, and it's a topic we should definitely explore more in depth.
You're right. We'll have to save that conversation for part 2 of our deep dive into the world of chatbots.
Yeah.
So stay tuned.
Welcome back. So, as we continue this deep dive into the world of chatbots, one thing I find really interesting is how the lines between human interaction and AI are becoming more and more blurry.
Yeah, you're right. I've definitely had moments where I've been typing away to a chatbot, and then I realized, wait a minute, this isn't a real person.
Hmm.
But then that makes me wonder, is it really about keeping humans and AI separate? Or is it more about finding ways to make them work together, like a good team?
Yeah, that's a key point that our source material brings up. It seems like a lot of companies are moving towards this kind of blended approach where they're using AI-powered chatbots, but they're also having human-operated live chat. So they're working together to give customers a better experience.
So it's kind of like they each have their own strengths, right? Like
Yeah.
the AI chatbot can handle those initial greetings, you get some basic information, maybe answer some really simple questions, and then if it gets too complicated, a human can step in.
Right, exactly. You can think of it like a dance. The chatbot leads the user through those first few steps, and then if a human touch is needed, they can seamlessly hand off the interaction to a live agent.
I like that analogy. It takes the pressure off both sides.
Yeah.
The AI isn't forced to do things it can't. And the human agent can focus on those interactions where you really need that empathy and understanding.
Right. And there are some real benefits to this approach, too. For one thing, it can really speed things up and reduce those wait times because chatbots can handle so many queries at the same time.
Yeah, and from a business perspective, it probably saves money too, right? Automating all those routine things frees up the human agents to focus on the more complex stuff where their skills are really needed.
Exactly. And maybe even more important is the impact on the user experience. This blended approach can create a much more personalized and engaging interaction because it's tailored to what each person needs.
So it's like the best of both worlds. People who want a quick answer can get that from the chatbot, and people who need a little bit more help can get that from a human.
Right. And the key is to make that transition between the chatbot and the live agent really smooth. Nobody wants to feel like they're being bounced around or like their issue isn't being taken seriously.
Yeah, that makes sense. Speaking of smooth transitions, the article talks about a company called Tidio that's doing some really interesting things with chatbot design. They've figured out how to simplify the whole interaction, so it's focused on solving the user's problem without a lot of extra steps.
It's a great example of that less is more philosophy applied to chatbots. Their whole approach seems to be about prioritizing getting the user's issue resolved rather than trying to collect a ton of information.
And it sounds like it's working. The article says they've seen a big increase in engagement since they simplify their chatbots. People are actually sticking around and interacting with them when it feels quick and helpful.
Right. It makes you wonder if we sometimes overthink things with chatbots, Maybe that laser focus on getting email addresses and other data is actually hurting our chances of really connecting with people.
It's a good point. What's more valuable in the long run, getting an email address from someone who never comes back, or creating a positive experience that makes them want to stick around?
This brings us back to that idea of trust. Users are much more likely to share information and engage with a chatbot if they feel like the company is respecting their time and their attention and their privacy.
That makes sense. But how do we balance that need for trust with the fact that businesses do need information from users in order to provide those personalized services and experiences? It seems like kind of a tricky balancing act.
It is. And the article really stresses the importance of transparency. If a chatbot needs to collect information from a user, it should be upfront about why it needs that information and what it's going to do with it.
So instead of just saying, please provide your email address, the chatbot could say something like, to send you a personalized quote, we need your email address. We promise not to share it with anyone else.
Exactly. It's all about setting clear expectations and making the user feel comfortable.
And what about choice? Do users always have to give their email address if they want to interact with the chatbot?
Not necessarily. The way the chatbot is designed is really important here. It should be easy for users to choose not to provide information or to find another way to interact.
Like, for example, if a chatbot offers a discount code via email, it could also give the user the option to just see the code right there in the chat window, or maybe give them a link where they can get it without having to give up their email address.
That's a great example of giving users a sense of control over their own information. It shows that you respect their preferences and it builds trust.
So it sounds like we're talking about a pretty big shift in how we think about chatbots. It's
Well,
not about tricking people into giving up their information. It's about creating an experience where everybody benefits.
right. It's about moving away from that transactional way of thinking and focusing more on building relationships.
It's interesting because this whole conversation has been very serious and analytical. But I'm wondering, is there room for a little more personality in chatbot design? Could a little bit of humor or a witty remark actually make the interaction more engaging and memorable?
That's a really interesting question, and I think it's one we should definitely explore more. I mean, if we want chatbots to feel more human, shouldn't they be able to make us smile or even laugh once in a while?
I think so. It would make them feel less robotic and more relatable.
Exactly. So maybe in the next part of our deep dive, we can dig a little deeper into the role of personality and humor and even ethics in the world of chatbot design.
I'm in. Sounds like a plan. Stay tuned for the final part of our chatbot deep dive, where we'll wrap up with some practical tips, some thought-provoking questions about the future of AI interaction. All right, so welcome back to the final part of our deep dive on chatbots. We've covered a lot of ground. Those email-hungry bots, the value-first approach, the whole human versus AI thing. So now let's kind of bring it all together. What are some practical things that we can actually do to make sure we're creating chatbots that are effective but also, enjoyable to interact with?
Well, it really comes down to shifting our mindset, moving away from that idea of just extracting data and thinking more about building a genuine connection with the user.
So it's like we're trying to build a relationship, not just get an email address.
Exactly. And just like in any relationship, those first impressions are super important. The article talks about how crucial it is to offer solutions up front. Don't make the user jump through hoops or give you their personal information before they even know if you can help them.
Right? It's like that classic saying, give a man a fish and you feed him for a day, teach a man to fish and you feed him for a lifetime. But I guess in the chatbot world, it's more like answer a user's question and you help them for a moment. Empower them to find their own answers and you create a loyal customer.
That's a perfect analogy. It really emphasizes the importance of thinking long term. That quick hit of getting an email address might seem great in the moment, but building a relationship that makes people want to come back for more, that's what really matters.
So how do we do that? How do we build trust with users?
Well, the article talks about engaging them in a meaningful conversation before you even ask for their contact information.
Okay, so it's back to that value-first approach we talked about.
Yeah. What can the chatbot offer that's truly helpful or valuable? Maybe it's providing information, answering questions really thoroughly, or even just being friendly and engaging, making the interaction pleasant.
So we need to show users that the chatbot is really there to help them not just get something from them.
Right. And when it's time to ask for information, be transparent about it. Explain why you need it and how you're going to use it.
So for example, instead of just a generic, please provide your email address, the chatbot could say, hey, if you want us to send you a personalized summary of our services, we just need your email address and we promise we won't share it with anyone else.
Exactly. Now you're getting it. That's much better because it gives the user a sense of control and it builds trust.
And it's also important to give users choices. Yeah. Right? They shouldn't be forced to provide information if they don't want to.
Right. This is where good design comes in, make it easy for users to opt out of sharing information or to choose a different way to interact.
So like if a chatbot offers a discount code through email, it could also let the user see the code right there in the chat window or maybe give them a link to access it without having to provide their email.
That's a great example.
Yeah.
It's all about respecting user preferences and showing them that you value their privacy.
We've talked a lot about the technical side of things, but what about the human element? You mentioned earlier that there might be room for some personality, even humor in chatbot interactions.
Yeah, absolutely. We talk about making chatbots more human, but I think that goes beyond just sounding natural. It's about giving them a little bit of personality, maybe even some wit to make the interaction more fun and memorable.
I've definitely seen chatbots that have made me laugh with a clever response.
Yeah.
It definitely makes them feel less like robots.
Right. And that can go a long way in building a connection, making the brand feel more relatable and human.
So it's not just about what the chatbot says, it's about how it says it. It's about finding that balance between being informative and helpful, but also engaging and even entertaining.
Exactly. At the end of the day, we have to remember that on the other side of that chatbot is a real person.
Yeah.
Someone who deserves to be treated with respect, who values their time and their privacy, and who might just appreciate a good laugh.
I think that's a great point to end on. As we move into this world of more and more AI interaction, let's make sure we're building chatbots that are not only effective, but also engaging, respectful, and maybe even a little bit delightful.
Well said. And until next time, happy chatting, everyone.